Was reading out loud.
Yourself. But I saw it. No, I think you got a shot one as well. Super. Wow. I think for like. It's okay. Why, September, I forget exactly what it should have been, but you mentioned. Okay, wow. And we was with any videos, the very various videos that catches on now. Remember saying it was fine, they probably did you want to bring.
Test, test, test. Can you hear me? Little loud. Okay. How about now? Is that better? Any better? All right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Can everyone just check online, make sure you can all hear me okay? Yeah, the review works. That's great to hear. All good? Awesome. Turn this thing around. It's very friendly. It likes to follow us all. Can you see me on the screen? Am I? Okay, awesome. Hi, everybody. How's it going? Welcome. Thanks for coming out to the first Cloud Native Security Pittsburgh, not in Pittsburgh, in London, right? But online, I think we have about 16 people online as well. So thanks for showing up. I think most of you are in the US, so welcome from London. I'm super excited to kick this off. So my name is John Ziel. I'm a CNCF ambassador, and so I'm starting this Cloud Native Security meetup. They require that it be geo-located, so I'm geo-bounding it to my hometown in Pittsburgh. We travel. My job will be at KubeCon, so in Chicago later this year, if anyone's coming to KubeCon NA. And I also teach classes for SANS, so I travel around for that. I'm going to bring that big box of kit with me and try to run these events as I travel around and do things like that. So I'm super excited to kick this off. I did post a quick video online because I wasn't sure if I was going to logistically get here on time, but it worked out that we started a little bit late as well. So thanks for everyone for sticking with me there. So we have apparently 3 talks today. Yeah, 3. Awesome. So we've got an addition to the agenda, so that'll be good. We're going to kick things off with Andy, and then we're going to roll with it from there. So Andy, you're going to come on up. Andy, I think I'll let you introduce yourself, but we've worked together in open source in the past in the CNCF tag group, and this is the first time we're meeting in person, so kind of cool. So, Andy.
Thank you very much. It is a delight and a pleasure to be here at the first Cloud Native Pittsburgh in London. Who are we supporting?
Steelers, yes.
Steelers. Knowledge expertly done. And yes, we have a third talk. We have a potential exciting special mystery guest who is currently waylaid. So the tension will build until the final moment. But in the meantime, I want to talk about tag security and how open source contributions can accelerate your career arc. Hi, I'm Andy. I'm from Control Plane, testing various AI-generated new logos. I've done various things. I was also previously involved with SANS. I love the organization. A bit of training for various organizations, and I'm a co-chair in tag security, and that's what I want to talk about today. My journey getting there and what it's brought me and the advantages that it can bring one and all. I also work for Open UK, helping to prevent government mishaps. So what and why is tag security? It is a group of individuals. You can see from the GitHub repo, it's under the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and it is a technical advisory group, which means 3 things, of course. One, it's a collective of individuals on a voluntary basis. Second of all, it is purely advisory. While we provide a function to the overseeing governing body of the CNCF, we are not blockers, as security perhaps sometimes is, and we're deeply technical. This is not hand-wavy security. It is under the skin, trying to understand the different actors, different positions and perspectives that people have on a particular project. And we work on hard security problems for the cloud native space. Our logo is a trash panda, which is an Americanism for a raccoon. And I'm pleased to say the raccoon is quite easy to generate with AI. So why is this a problem? Well, of course, open source has been at the forefront of digital transformations for the past 10+ years, and the groundswell of enthusiasm that we've seen have lowered costs for adopting organizations, but they've also introduced a new risk. And when the Linux Foundation, which is living and breathing open source, starts to sponsor Kubernetes and cloud native, this inherent dissonance between the advantages that an organization can gain and the risks that are inherent wrap up in themselves. On top of this, there's a whole lot of new code. And new code is where untested code paths can potentially lead to vulnerabilities. They also lead to new patterns and practices of deployment. And these things require scrutiny, they require testing. Often things are not clear until something's been battle tested for months or years. So we work in this space in order to try and harden, strengthen, and robustify the open source ecosystem. So what does Tag Security do? Well, we have a charter. We perform assessments for projects looking to graduate, which means as the CNCF adopts a new project, it goes through multiple stages that involve incubation, sandbox, where they kind of play and find their feet, eventually working up to graduation, which is where they become a fully fledged member and they enjoy some of the benefits of being a CNCF project, including a marketing budget, the massive amplification that one gets from being on the CNCF landscape, and the supporting financial advantages that venture capital and private equity will see from that open source community-based approach to product development. We also take presentations from new projects who maybe aren't graduating but are looking for some sort of objective questioning or advice. There are working groups that produce specific outputs. And finally, we report back to the TOC on a monthly basis to, I hesitate to say demonstrate value, but prove that we're conformant to the TOC charter and overall the CNCF's ultimate mission. It is really worth understating. It is done on a voluntary basis. And so there is a non-corporate approach to security from that perspective. So the mission itself, we're just trying to reduce risk. That is a broad and frankly unbounded problem set. That is the risk of compromise of end user data, personally identifying information, the risk of being bounced through for a next attack. So how do we do this? Publishing educational resources. We have published a number of white papers. We publish advisory to other special interest groups and tags in the CNCF. We also have run a CTF at KubeCon for a number of years to build people up and to help educate as to the risks of running cloud native applications so that from a Sun Tzu perspective, we know our enemy and then can harden our systems against them. We're there as a reference point to ask questions for other people, finding scenarios, identifying potential projects for consideration, cross-pollinating knowledge with other projects and tags. I mean, it sounds grandiose, it's actually quite difficult. Finding the time to form the primary function as well as working in the ecosystem is a more difficult challenge. And integrating relevant external standards. Anybody who's worked with a specific NIST or PCI or HIPAA regulation will understand that that is a level setting game of balancing. That can be a little bit tricky. So what is the point? Well, we're looking basically to help secure projects and to make sure that we don't have our SolarWinds moment or our Spectre moment as a cloud native community. Broadly, protection and tooling generation and understanding reasonably bounded and clear. Importantly, we are not a standards body. There is absolutely no interest in trying to anneal the world into our own form of perspective or our lens. You know, compliance body, umbrella organization, certification board. We're not an abstract security oracle. I hesitate to overuse the word. Very constrained to cloud native and the projects under the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Device security, ultimately, Cloud Native involves the shared responsibility model, and therefore we're less interested in the underlying hardware and more in the software abstractions, containers and virtualization that build on top of those. And non-cloud related trust and safety concerns are not our concern. Technical Oversight Committee rule the roost, as I've said. That is because the CNCF is a voluntary organization. In order to join, people pay a membership fee, but there must be some accountability for the spending, the expenditure of that money, and that involves codes of conduct, clear guardrails and regulation, clear guardrails and guidance as to responsibilities and accountabilities. As I said, as a voluntary organization, it is generally done with a lot of kindness and goodwill. But nevertheless, it still exists in order to prevent bad actors from subverting the process. group relationships, of course, yeah, this is back to trying to work with everything from tag app runtime to tag sustainability. There's a huge range of not necessarily competing interests, but non-tessellating interests. That is the nature of any sort of socio-technical interaction. And then finally, once again, working within the operating guidelines. What do we present to TAC? Well, every month we have to do something a little bit like this. This is a new format for this month. We actually didn't have a meeting because of Labor Day this week. But what do we do? Close off a load of issues, because like any project on GitHub, we languish some of the old issues. Working in EMEA, contributor activities. So this Flatcar assessment, Flatcar is a CoreOS fork. And I was a big fan of CoreOS back in the day. CoreOS got bought by Red Hat, who then turned it into Fedora CoreOS. Kinvolk then forked Flatcar Linux from that, and here we have Flatcar. So the actual lineage of the project goes Gen 2 Chrome OS, which is built from Gen 2 and has this Omaha dual partition atomic update system. So Gen 2 Chrome OS, CoreOS, Flatcar. So one of the first questions were, where does the code come from? Oh, everywhere. And then we kind of dug into how they accept code contributions, how they're merged in, how CI works, how CI is isolated, what their 2FA is for different types of access by VPN or code commits or SSH access, etc. And that's the level of depth that the assessment goes to. It is guided by the people on the assessment and, from a tag perspective, their capabilities. So we're lucky to have, for example, people who are very concerned with supply chain security. That means we can get under the hood of recency, freshness, cryptographic hashing, content addressability in the same breath. So that's the kind of thing that Flatcar got. Zero Trust white paper. I'll talk about the working groups, but we've generated a number of white papers, the cloud native security white paper, the supply chain security white paper, now the Zero Trust white paper, as a response to the Biden administration's impending, well, sort of excellent legislation that will extend beyond government suppliers, probably to the whole world eventually. So we try and get a jump on that and provide useful, tangible, non-exhaustive guidance for implementers. Fuzzing handbook, there's a company called Ada Logics, who are actually based out of London, who've basically fuzzed every open source project in the CNCF. They're doing an incredible job, and they're being sponsored by OSTIF, the Open Source Technology Improvement Fund, to do this work. They were invited by the CTO of the Linux Foundation to contribute in. He said, maybe you guys should talk. So they've now written a piece of a few pages that will integrate into our assessment guide. And then all of a sudden, we've just, the joy of open source, someone's contributed something and we can integrate it without having the expertise or the domain knowledge, but just, rising tides all boats. And then presentations for 3 projects that are coming through the CNCF, COPA, Knative Guard, and the I Am Privileged catalog. They are very different projects. And this abstract view of security, where you can have a presentation, and it may mean, for somebody who's not used Istio, Knative is then an abstraction further. And so to listen to these kind of presentations and hear people with domain knowledge ask intelligent questions, this is where the point of the talk really, makes sense, which is not for me to say, but resonates in this wording. Because it is exposure to people with a far greater depth of experience, understanding, and insight in specific problem domains and security areas that really makes tag security such a rich and vibrant community. So just lurking and listening can bring so much, speaking personally, so much education and so much reframing of considerations or thoughts I had in different perspectives. My request to the TAC this month was, can we have more volunteers from your magic volunteer pot? I don't know where that pot actually is, the end of a rainbow somewhere. Obviously, it's the eternal problem. And yeah, we're doing a few more things. The in progress and upcoming are the interesting bits, perhaps. Still working on Flatcar. New York University is going to engage a few hundred students in threat model projects before they come to the tag, which will be fantastically interesting. Cilium is getting reopened. It's actually graduated, so in this case, we're perhaps slightly outside of our remit we'll see where that goes. And then we're going to be assessing Kubeflow, which is the next project that I will be leading, as well as doing KubeCon, excuse me. So we are almost there, just having a look at what we've got in the repos on GitHub, the return of the raccoons. So these are the kind of assessments that we're looking at the moment. Kubeflow is coming up. As I say, Cilium has actually graduated, so to some extent, the recommendation that Tag performs, which is these things should be fixed before the project is graduated, make little sense, actually, in this particular case. Flatcar, again, is underway. Various things, some people here contributed to the Flux multi-tenancy, which was taking Flux v1 and turning it into a multi-tenant v2 GitOps operator. Questions then become, well, what about data access? How are you classifying the data? And where is the memory, I say memory safety in Golang, but at what point could you have a key exposure across tenants and under what circumstances, etc. And some of those questions resonated with the Flux team, and they modified bits and pieces. And then presentations, the kind of things we've had coming through recently. Bank Vaults is Vault by another name. So that's come under the new HashiCorp business license thing, which I think was kind of resonant for the, well, essential to actually talking about the usage of the thing. Knative Security, we said, I improved the catalog. There was an interesting one from Intel on the secure software guiding principles, which more or less boiled down to, are you using SBOMs? Are you dedicated to the safety of the consumers of your software? Are you dedicated to transparently fixing things? And then raised a lot of questions about, well, exactly how many teeth does this proposal have? Is it, again, purely advisory, or in the event of non-conformance with the statement, would you downgrade a supplier? So really sort of moving into the philosophical security realm to some extent. How is this, what is the intention here, and how will this actually be used? And then the graph for understanding artifact composition, collaboration between some long-term collaborators in Tag Security, Kusari and Google, to build an object graph of all dependencies. Again, very interesting recent piece. So these things are so disparate and diverse, but they cover a range of future-leaning security topics that keep the mind fresh and engaged, I would say. The number of security reviews that we've done in the last couple of years, the big ones there, notably in Toto, Caverno, and Opa, they're all fundamental supply chain or runtime security projects. Spiffy Spire, underpinning identity, and then Harbor, of course, actually the home of the supply in the chain. So yes, all sorts. Project at the top is actually a typo. That is not a project. It is the title of projects. And then you see we have other working groups. And we built various things over the years. Again, that NIST controls mapping is a labor of love. No signal from where, we wonder. Yeah, resonant inductive coupling. So, the Cloud Native Security White Paper has now been translated into 6 or 7 different languages. And yeah, I did this kind of, even though it is an English language group for the meetings, it's translated into, I think, Chinese, Japanese, Italian, a few other languages as well. So the upshot of all this is how to get started. Slack is a rich and verdant, again, stream of interesting links and things going past. People are perfectly welcome to join meetings with their cameras off. There is generally a request to introduce oneself, or at least tag an affiliation or interest in the meeting notes, but it's by no means mandatory. You can also just jump in on a GitHub issue and say, this looks interesting, I would just like to observe. And again, it is this nature of being able to feed off the intellect of the people already in the group that I found so terrifically accelerating for my understanding and knowledge for some of these things. And then finally contribute. But this is a graded scale, of course. There is absolutely no requirement. It makes a lot of sense for the group if people just get meeting or observation level, because ultimately we're lacking in cybersecurity practitioners. So that really fulfills the group's mandate if people just are interested enough to observe. a quick whiz through one initiative that I put a lot of time into last year, which is trying to move forward this cadence of the backlog of projects. So when we're looking to escalate projects through to graduates, we don't always need to do full exhaustive threat modeling and self-assessment. So this process, basically, we went through and we had an hour-long meeting with, I mean, some of the best people. People like Rory McCune turned up, who's an old school Kubernetes hacker. Funny to be able to say that when it's only kind of 8 years old, but nevertheless. And we've played this balance of, okay, well, what do we want? How are we going to make sure this Flux multi-tenancy review happens expediently? Because the problem with voluntary-based organizations is, when can we meet? Let's set up a doodle. Okay, it's going to be 3 weeks' time, and the cadence and the frequency is so slow. So the goal here was to move everything into the synchronous meetings and do this as quickly as possible. So we did that not only in the planning for the threat model, but also the execution of it. We looked at the Mozilla Rapid Risk Assessment, which made a lot of sense. It provides a framework for perhaps non-experts to be able to still run through and have guardrails for the process, and then built these interview questions with the help of this raccoon. Where's the data? Where does it go? How is it communicated with? Do we have encryption? We've got untrusted sources. Where's our validation? We start off by trying to fundamentally understand how the project works. And then we build a data dictionary. The combination of these things, while simply deconstructing the project, give a view and allow us to make high-level recommendations back to the project. This is the way that we're trying to move security in cloud native forward more quickly. And with that, there's lots of ways to join us. Slack is probably the easiest and most interesting. And thank you very much for your time and attention. If anyone has one specific question, I'll happily answer it, or else I shall cede the floor. Yeah. Sorry, could you speak louder? So metrics for resilience. Oh. Yeah, so robustification is not a word, but I like it. Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. In order to measure the security of a given large project, you might do something like count the number of tickets or issues raised that have security as a side effect. But then you're beholden to the way they're triaged. Maybe two different organizations don't do that quite the same way. You could also say, well, what's your, from a supply chain perspective, mean time to remediation? OpenSSL has a bug. It's a 0 day. Everyone needs to patch. How long did it take your project to fix it? You've got good CI, good tests. It should be, less than a day, a few hours. Intrusion detection. Yes, I'm sorry. So how do you apply IDS to these projects? Intrusion detection is it sits at a slightly different level. So the projects that tend to come through would be, and Flatcar is a difficult one because it's an outlier, because it's an operating system. You don't normally assure operating systems, because I can't use the words on the live stream because they'll come back to haunt me, but it's a reasonably sizable escapade. So from that perspective, intrusion detection is about who escalated their permissions outside of the bounding set that they were given in the first place. For most of these applications, you wouldn't necessarily detect an intrusion. So for example, if somebody was able to escalate their permissions for Flux, then they would perhaps gain cluster admin credentials for another cluster. So Flux has an operational mode where there's a management cluster, and it then controls X other clusters. If the management cluster was compromised, the keys to all the other clusters would then be available to the attacker, and they would potentially then exploit those. Intrusion detection would then be a function of the Kubernetes API audit logs. or perhaps a shell spawning detection if someone's using a control SSH or something like that. So from an intrusion detection perspective, the closest we've come is something like Cystic Falco, which is a detective intrusion detection system, as opposed to more sort of vendor-based products tend to detect, but then also shut something down. So while those things are security tools, we're more concerned with the security of the applications that lead to the initial compromise, because the operating system should have no open sockets or external ports that allow access, whereas the applications running in Kubernetes have web-facing sockets, and that's where potentially someone can get in, remote code execution, container breakout or lateral movement, and then onto the underlying host or the cloud infrastructure. And that's the point that CloudTrail or local intrusion detection would discover it, hopefully.
So that's a thing I'm particularly as you said, no socket.
Yeah, I think I mean, any sensible system should not only have intrusion detection as the last line of defense, because protective controls in the pipeline will go so far, protective controls at runtime also so far, but then finally intrusion detection is the last line of defense. And also honeypots, canary tokens, really nothing is infallible. And so the greater number of sensors that a system has, well, I guess proportional to the classification of the data on the system. Yeah, absolutely. But we concern ourselves with the higher level rather than the operational. Right. Thank you very much.
Be interesting, because I have 2 demos.
Done, done, done. Oh, do you want to use this laptop? That's good.
I'll just take.
Yep.
And is this HDMI?
Yeah, that one.
I'll do native HDMI.
The clicker is that one if you want it.
I have vertical and horizontal
Cool.
slides, so it won't work.
Man.
See if we can get a little bit more out of it. Oh my God. All right, bear with me for a minute while we get this all set up. Got a couple things to rearrange here. I'm gonna disconnect so I don't knock a bunch of things over. We will get video back here in 1 minute. Hi. That's fine. Oh, that won't be fine. I have to say this kit is working out fairly well. I can't complain. See if I can get it a little further away from me. And get the camera back up and running. And change my video. That's better. Your live tracking on. If I move over here, it's working. I'm not going to be moving very much, but that'll be okay. How's audio coming through? I think I'm on. Anybody in the chat, give me a thumbs up, down. perfect. Thank you. Let's get a TV going. All right. We've got some progress here. And I should be able to also share my screen. So this will be a little bit better. Oh, there we go. Okay. So let's see where I'm at here. I wonder if it's gonna. Are you able to see me? Yeah, right, exactly. Are you able to see me when I go to the other screen when I'm over here? I can't tell because I don't have a self view. Yes. All right, great. All right, we're gonna do this. Woohoo! It's up there, it's on here, it's there. This is working out way better than I thought it was going to. I thought this wasn't gonna work at all. So I'm kind of I'm pretty happy about this. So don't jig. Oh yeah, knock on something. I don't know. All right, so I already introduced myself. My name is John Ziola. Let me refresh that because you have to see the typing animation. Like I put a lot of work into this, right? JavaScript. Thank you very much. Welcome to my talk. So this is going to be a fairly abbreviated talk. I threw a couple quick demos together last night. We're going to be talking about security policy as code. I was just going to call it policy as code, but we're specifically focusing on security, cybersecurity, cloud security, things like that. I have way too many slides about myself, but I am Pittsburgh. I have a consulting company that does cloud native security and compliance. I teach classes, that's why I'm here. So big thank you to SANS for sponsoring my flight out here, first class, woohoo. CNCF ambassador, right? I'm a big fan of them. I also work in the Apache Software Foundation, some minor work in the OpenSSF, and I have some of my open source projects that are mine. Community builder, you can see my stickers. B-Sides Pittsburgh, so I run our local B-Sides. Well, not only me, right? We have a group of 8 people, but I'm one of the 3 primary ones. I do a security meetup, PitSec workspace, and this. So no logo yet, but eventually I will have a logo for this. If anyone has skills with like even how to direct a designer, I would definitely appreciate that because I'm like, I don't know, make it look good. That's not very helpful. Yeah. Yeah. I tried AI generated. I tried DALL-E, and I used all my credits, and I didn't get anywhere useful. So I was like, I don't know, a ship in the cloud. I tried to key off of some of the Trash Panda stuff that didn't work super well for me. So you did a better job than I did. But yeah, that's just a URL shortener. You don't have to use it. You can just Google it or something. So why are we talking about what we're talking about? Well, we have companies, probably. Either we have companies that we secure other people's companies as engineers and consultants. Executives, auditors, clients, they ask questions, right? They want to know about our security controls. They'd like to use our services. They'd like to sell their company, and they want to be prepared for due diligence. In order to provide that assurance, we need evidence, right? It's difficult to scale. It's very hard to put together. I've recently been talking to some companies that said they have a 7-person team who primarily take screenshots for a living. And I was like, what? They said FedRAMP. And I said, what? Screenshots. Like, okay, let's fix this problem, right? Also, people hate this work, right? Most people don't enjoy this sorts of activities, high toil, unrewarding activities. And I think I've got something in the way here. Humans make mistakes. I think that'll be a good spot for it. So that's what we're talking about. Also, to some degree, give me some feedback because I don't know this audience. I'm not from here, obviously. So you're like, duh. You're welcome to tell me that. So I'm going to be primarily leveraging other resources, some prior work that I've done. You want to pick a baseline. How do you start? So this was one of the things that Andy had mentioned. So on the CNCF blog, we have the Cloud Native Security Controls Catalog. This was an initiative that I led in Tag Security. And the idea was that we have numerous white papers that were coming out of tag security, and there were lots of word, and companies started asking the question, that's great, how do I know if I'm doing what's in the white paper? White paper's long and detailed, lots of explanation words. Can you boil it down to like a list of things to do, like duties? Can I say I'm 50% compliant, or I'm following 50% of the recommendations from those white papers, right? And I think these links still work. Yep, so we've got, this is V1 of the Cloud Native Security White Paper, which was alluded to earlier. There's a whole bunch of interesting content in the index. This is just Cloud Native Security. We also have the software supply chain best practices focused on security, and there are new papers coming out, right? There's version 2 of the Cloud Native Security White Paper, which we're going to be updating to, and Zero Trust. There was also a serverless paper, which I believe is going to get folded into Cloud Native Security White Paper v3. So with this controls catalog initiative, we are boiling that down to, unfortunately for MVP, a spreadsheet, right? Not a huge fan, but we've distilled the information, put some basic schema around it. So we've got about 200, just under 200 bullet points. And we're really focusing here on the control title, and we've mapped it back to different sections in originating documents. So companies can say, how can I help with this? And one example I could talk about is 3M. So they said, I want to see if I'm following the supply chain security best practices. They used the white paper, and they found it a little bit difficult. They made a version of this very similar. We ended up merging our projects together, so that was kind of useful. We also mapped out some risk categories, assurance levels, and a best effort. You'll notice there are some empty spots, especially closer to the top. Oh, actually, we did a pretty decent job, better than I remember, of mapping things to 853 R5. There's a little white space, right? So imperfect, but something. We had all kinds of great conversations with the Center for Internet Security and other orgs about how do you actually map across frameworks. Nobody agrees, hard problem. Someone's going to solve that. It's probably not going to be me, right? I think Center for Internet Security really wants that, but also the Cloud Security Alliance is heavily interested in focusing on that problem, right? We could treat everything like a set. We could do composition. There's lots of ways to skin that cat, but let's close all of those out. So if you're interested, there's a blog from about a year ago that says how you might be able to use this. Gotten okay feedback so far, not great about it. You know, a very kind of limited number of organizations have let us know that they've used it, and I'm interested in more of those. And one of my goals is to migrate the format to something a little bit more programmatically useful. All right, and that, if you're familiar, would be OSCAL. So we'll talk about OSCAL in a little bit. All right, so let's do a quick demo. This might feel like a little bit of a hodgepodge. I apologize in advance, but let's do a demo of something policy as code related. Let's see, which is the first one? Attestation, I think. All right, so we are building a project. We would like to create this, publish it, and we'd like to identify as maybe a user of this project if it's okay or not. How do we know if it's okay, if our policy at our company says it's okay to use this project? So it's a fairly simple Ubuntu. Oh, it's cut off, isn't it? Not losing a ton there, but I have fixed width, so we're gonna just lose a little bit on the left. So simple Docker file, Ubuntu 2204, does some really important things. We want to use this project. Someone on the internet made it. So we are creating an image, and we're going to build it. And we're going to create, during the build process, a Salsa provenance document, right? So that is going to use Salsa 0.2. If you're following the Salsa project, you know that there's also a version 1.0 that's out. But this is kind of my easy button, a couple arguments to a Docker build X build, no big deal. All right, so I built this. I've built it multiple times, so it's cached. I was trying to speed things up today. Awesome. So I've built and pushed this. I believe it just went out on Docker Hub somewhere. Let's confirm that it does. We'll do a quick run. Oh, there we go. It works. So that's what this project does. It honks at us with a rainbow cow because that's, I don't know, that's my style, I guess. But this is a thing that we would like to consider using in our organization. How do we use the information that has been provided so far in order to do that? So let's take a look at that image, and we're going to extract the provenance from it, and we can jump around, right? So here is the provenance information that was created and stored. We can see things regarding how it was created and when it was created, right? Salsa 0.2 specification, which there were some changes. But we've got a variety of different bits of context here, right? Nothing specifically to read, and this is a pretty straightforward process and image, but we have some evidence. We can see what version control, what hash of what source it came from, things like that. Okay, great. So we have this salsa provenance. It's published on Docker Hub. I ran a simple command and I was able to pull it down. Great. As the package maintainer, I may also want to assign it. We're going to use a project called Cosign that's under the Project Sig store in the CNCF. And you can see here, I just made a quick password and a key pair locally, a public and private key, and I'm going to use that to sign this image. And that signature appears to have been successful. Yes. So I just pushed a signature out to index.docker.io. And I think if that worked right, we'll go to hub.docker.com/r/John Ziola provenance tags. And yes, so we can say a few seconds ago, we just pushed this additional OCI artifact to the Docker Hub registry, and it contains information for signing the other image, right? You can see that, well, you can't see super well in this interface, but this hash maps us to this image. That's what we're doing there, right? Wrong way. All right. So far we have a Salsa 0.2 provenance for our honking cow, rainbow honking cow, actually. And we've pushed that up as well as a signature. And if you look, we've added a couple of other bits of information to that signature. We have tag equals latest and approval equals John Ziola. So I'm saying that I approve this image. This is something obviously you could do internally to an organization as well as externally. We'll talk about an external organization doing work like this right now in a minute. So I want to make sure that that signature is valid. I run cosign verify. It works. There's a bunch of stuff here, but this bottom block is what goes to standard out. So if you pipe this through JQ or something like that, that's what you're actually going to get. The other information goes to standard error, so it doesn't pass the pipe unless you redirect it. You can see at the end here, we have approval from John Ziola, whatever that means to us. That's in this cryptographically and high integrity location. So now we're going to check the approval. We say we only want to use images that have been reviewed and approved by John Ziola. Maybe this is reviewed and approved by the Alpha Omega project. But just as an example, we're okay with John Ziola approving this. So I did a cosign verify, and I pretty much extracted the approval from the end. And we have a quick policy as code check, right? If the approval is John Ziola, then it's approved. Otherwise, don't use. This is like super, super, super naive policy, right? High level proof of concept. All right. So that's that. So pretty easy to get started with this sort of thing. And how do we take this to the next level? So there is anyone, oh yeah. Is anyone familiar with Alpha Omega, the OpenSSF project? Okay, yeah, a little bit, cool. So in the Alpha Omega project, they have this thing called the OAF, the Omega Assertion Framework. I refreshed myself on this last night, but previously I'd been following a couple of different issues and PRs regarding this. Lost track of it for a little bit, but it seems like they've still been hard at work, right? So the Alpha Omega project is, I think, directly funded by some large organizations. I may get these wrong, but I believe Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and some others. I know at least Microsoft employees are working on the project as a lead. And they have this Omega assertion framework. So what does this mean? That means that they took what I just showed in a demo and blew it up, 1,000 times. They are doing fairly dedicated assessments of open source tools and projects and ecosystems. And their goal is to use the Omega assertion framework as a way to publish attestations that they have performed a security review, partially automated and partially manual, of these different projects and ecosystems. So now, as companies that want to consume those projects we can have an explicit trust by saying we will trust projects that have been assessed by Alpha Omega, and the findings are some sort of threshold, right? Moving towards zero trust, which I say many times is not really zero trust, it's zero implicit trust, right? So we are saying we can explicitly trust things because it's been signed and reviewed by company X, Y, and Z. All right, so this project is worth keeping an eye on. There are lots of different organizations kind of getting involved here. If anyone you know the Intoto project, there's some references in here to potentially re-evaluating the way that they're signing. Yep, here, right here, and potentially moving with forward with Intoto attestations or something else. And all of that is kind of in flux right now. But my goal with this talk is not to exhaustively cover anything, but just to give a little bit of a survey, right? Cool. So that's the Omega assertion framework. Now I'm going to just iteratively iframe a bunch of different websites that I think are doing some cool work. All right. So we'll start with the Open Policy Agent project. So this was mentioned in the last talk, as is the next couple of slides. And so in the OPA project, they have open source projects like Gatekeeper and Conftest and others, and are supporting this Rego language as a way to enforce policy as code to say, if you are deploying something into a Kubernetes cluster, you may want to ensure through an admission hook validation that it conforms in some way. Maybe that it has a cosign signature. Maybe that it's been approved. So you can put that and enforce that via Gatekeeper and setting up admission hooks to ensure that John Ziola has approved your thing or Alpha Omega has approved your thing. Now, if you don't want a project outside of your Kubernetes cluster doing this sort of validation, we now have the Common Expression Language and beta in the latest version of the beta's release of Kubernetes. And I was reminded, actually, I still have to open a PR for this. I believe the documentation is out of date, where no longer beta features are enabled by default. I believe that's true. Is that true? Does anyone know for sure? I found a PR saying that that is now the case, even though the documentation says beta features in Kubernetes are on by default. Newer PR said, no, they're off by default now. So until I get someone to 100% validate, I don't know what the current state is, but I was going to open a PR to the docs and see if I get declined, if it's wrong. Just start at the wall, see what sticks. So, but anyways, what's cool about Cell is that you're now able to run parts of this inside your cluster. You no longer have dependencies outside your cluster, so additional latency or potential downtime, trying to figure out if you need to fail open or fail closed, or things along those lines. So if you're interested in this, very new, still beta, but possible to do with some new custom objects. We've also got Kyverno. I think Kyverno is a very popular project. A lot of people like that is specifically focused on Kubernetes. I personally think of it as similar to the OPA Gatekeeper project, but with a less broad language and a more focused language specifically on the Kubernetes ecosystem. I do a little bit of work in the policy working group, and in there I get to work with Jim Bagwadia a little bit, who's one of the primary maintainers of Kyverno. Same sort of concepts there, right? How can we ensure that things that are going into our clusters are allowed? They've been signed, they've been approved, they've been reviewed. All right, another project, Guac. I have no idea what this stands for. I'm pretty sure, actually, I know for a fact, it's a backronym just to play off of salsa, right? So in the Guac project, the goal is to understand software supply chain better. Initially started with a proof of concept with the Neo4j backend, but has been evolving. They've got an in-memory database now, and they're working on some additional new backend support. Lots of really cool innovation is going on here. The idea is we have all of these new supply chain artifacts because SolarWinds, et cetera, et cetera. Where do we put them? How do we shove them in a giant graph and ask questions of them? I especially like, it's funny because I've kind of latched onto this, and it seems like the Guac developers don't really care about this thing that they created, but I like, is the idea of chips. So we've got these chips in Guac, and those would be like the clients that interact with the Guac graph. They seem to have used that term like 2 times and never since, but I'm gonna keep saying it until they tell me to stop. Anyways, a lot of the people at Kasari, at Google, and some other organizations are investing a lot in here. So if you know, like Michael Lieberman or Brandon Lum or those people, I won't try to name them all because then I definitely will miss some and then I'll feel bad. But they're working fairly intently on this, seeing a lot of development. There's a UI now that is seeing some iteration. It actually has a dark mode, so like, woohoo, this is great. We've got progress. The dark mode, you can read things on it. That's second level, like good. We're making progress here. And there was an official beta release, which is pretty awesome. I have to say, I was pretty impressed with the velocity of this project. And it is, I believe, still in the process of being moved under the OpenSSF. It's kind of wandering a little bit right now, but with the plan to get it in there, as long as we can, they can wrap a few things up. So if you're interested in that, you can go to their docs. They've got a nice, quick Docker Compose get started, and extremely easy to work in. Also, what's been interesting about this is finding bugs in upstream projects that create supply chain artifacts, not actually meeting the specifications when we try to analyze them more deeply. And a lot of respect for this project. They've been doing a lot of great work with the engineering and progress. Another project. So this is I believe, an IBM sponsored project or an IBM project, one of the two, called Compliance Trestle. This is a Python-based project for simplifying the interactions with OSCAL, the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, which is a schema for us to exchange information about security activities that have occurred in our environment. It's sponsored by NIST, and it's very focused on FedRAMP, as you maybe expect, but they claim to have supported ISO 27001, and I forget some GRC framework as well, but it's very controls-oriented, not risk-based or risk-oriented, although they say that it can support that as well. The Trestle project is just a tool which simplifies the interaction with it, and this is probably what I'll be using to move from what you saw in that Google worksheet to OSCAL. They've got some nice standard Python objects where I can load something in as a CSV, populate an object, and then write file. So if you have to manage super large SSPs or related documents for compliance, this is one of a suite of tools to help do that. I like it because it's fully open source. This does not look super well with the dark background, but I can do that. So that's the best that, the best that I could do. So ConfTest, so this also comes from the OPA project, but is focused on the configuration files. And so I particularly like it because I like to use Rego, and I do a lot of work in pipelines. So pipelines, config files, ConfTest. So if you want to enforce policy as code, oop, that's not working. On config files, you can support YAML and Docker files and things like that here, and more. These are not iframed because they have content security policies that prevent me from doing so. So kind of kudos to them, but also that's kind of a little frustrating. Lula didn't have a choice in the matter because it was GitHub's fault. GitHub.com does not allow you to iframe them. Okay, oh well. But Lula is from the Defense Unicorns and an online contributor that I've worked with in the past. Brant Keller is the primary developer and author of this tool. And started as kind of a proof of concept. We'll see where it goes. He's just getting back from maternity leave, so we'll figure out how much effort he's going to be able to put into this. But he did a Kyverno-based, I think Kyverno and Istio, I believe, integration where you could say if you have a service mesh set up, you're good. If not, you're not good, sort of evaluation by hooking into Kyverno. And then I also mentioned Entoto, so this has some tooling around it for creating provenance and then also specifications for attestations. It feels a little academic to me right now, but it is definitely implemented and being used in other projects, especially being referenced in the Alpha Omega OAF project, and potentially get more use there. So this talk was meant to be just a little bit of fire hose or like a smattering of different things. So hopefully that was a little bit value. I'm going to wrap things up with another very brief demo on paved roads. So at least in my experience, lots of people say this word paved road, and it's a little ambiguous. There's not some great examples publicly. So at my company, we have a paved road for doing Python in Docker containers. That's a very common thing that we end up doing. I made a paved road for us, and I decided to open source that lately. So we'll just do a quick demo to see what that means. That's the wrong direction. All right, so in order to kick things off, you just do a pipx run. This is using a project called Cookie Cutter. Again, we do a lot of Python work, so Cookie Cutter is a Python project. It's kind of active, might be getting replaced by Cookie Ninja. We'll see what happens there. So you run this command, and then it's going to give us something like 10 questions. You have to name it, pick a slug, a short description. We could say this is an example. Oh, wow, this is hard to type like this. Maybe if I do this, ample cloud native security, Pittsburgh. I don't know if that'll work, but I'll try it. It's a project owner, so it'll make a code owners by default, who is going to be the owner of this project, so that from the beginning, you have peer review of everything and the correct person's approving it. Bunch of defaults, Python version, the newest one. Ubuntu, not the newest one, because 2204 doesn't work with us yet. Docker Hub, let's say no. We're going to use Calver, which will release every single commit with calendar-based versioning, because I'm super aggressive with regard to releasing. Just release all the time and test everything all the time. And this will not be public by default, which means we're just going to have a regular copyright license instead of the other two that I like, which are MIT or BSD3 clause. Also a fan of, Apache too. So right now it's doing a bunch of stuff. It has rendered a bunch of Jinja templates, made files based on those Jinja templates, and we're going to see what this project can do once it's rendered. It's got a bunch of post-generation hooks to make a Git repo and things like that. And so that's why it takes a couple of seconds. We'll see how long. I should get a T-log entry because I use Git sign. And so I'll get a little like entry in there. That's another project SigStore tool. And it'll probably pop up like, you've authenticated, you've signed your thing. And that's another way where we can get signatures from the beginning of generating this project. But there we go. There's our T-log entry. So we signed it, we pushed that up to Rekor, and it's got a Git sign signature on it from the beginning. And if you go over here, you'll see SigStore authentication successful. I wish that this thing didn't pop up every time I commit something. It is like the most annoying. Like this is what we have. That's why you stopped using it. Yeah, it's super annoying. Yeah. Right, exactly. So. All right, so we've got a repo now. It's called to do because that was the default, and we're going to init that repo. We use task files. I heard some opinions lately on the internet that make files are the best thing in the world. I don't know if anyone follows Dan Lawrence, but not a fan. Absolutely not a fan. I will just quickly github.com, John Ziola. Today I learned. So this is my super old repo that I don't really use anymore. But this is why I don't like make files. Make files are like onions. Good luck trying to run Docker run commands with variables inside of a make file. You need to do \$ curly bracket variable curly bracket. But it's a backtick if it's a command in a container on your host. Like, I'm done. I'm out of here. Peace out. So we'll go over here. So we moved the task files. Task files are a Go-based project that configure your project in YAML. It's still imperfect. Passing variables around is a little messy, but it's all right. So I initted it. That does a variety of different things, including some pre-commit hooks with our policy as code enforcer. When you start, you can grep for not implemented error. That's in the instructions. That's where you put your business logic. So it's like start there. Like where that is, put like an entry point to your business logic. I don't know. We can run linting. We've got our custom built linter, which runs all of those linters in parallel. And usually it takes about 2 seconds. I'm not sure why it's taking so long right now. It's probably because I'm being recorded. This is strange. Interesting. Why do I have so many containers running too? Oh no, that's fine. Okay, it worked. Oh, it found errors. That's interesting. Um, hmm. My exclusion. Oh, yeah, that looks like a problem. I blame our internet. That's why it took so long. Econ reset. All right. So we got an issue because the internet broke. Try not to have the internet break when you're rendering it. But this is what the project looks like, excluding some boilerplate things. It's pretty standard stuff. Like git ignore, Docker file. It's got workflows built into it by default. So when you commit, it's going to release every single commit. When you do a PR, it's going to run your tests, standard stuff. It's got security checking, which is workflow dispatch. That's hard to see up there, but that means you press the button, it does your security scans. And we've got automated updates, which run on a cron, which is randomly generated. So it automatically opens a PR against my repo every Monday and Thursdays. And I just accept that if I want to update all the dependencies in my project, because I hate maintenance. And that feels like toil to me. All that stuff's in there already by default. It has multi-platform Docker builds as well. So you do platform equals all. And you can see I'm building an ARM64, which is what I'm actually running, and an AMD 64, which will take like forever to do if I let this thing finish. So I'm just going to wait until the ARM64 image finishes building, and then we're going to control C this sucker. Should take like 25 seconds. I should have like prepared some jokes or something to put in at this point. Like this is a great, like, I don't know, awkwardly stand in front of the group. Juggling, yeah, there we go. Okay, it's done. So yeah, we're going to control C the AMD 64 one. It has tests built in by default, 100% test coverage. That's not actually that useful because there's no business logic, but at least you got the right spot and some examples on how to run the tests. That's built into it too. It's got SBOMs. It creates Cyclone DX, SPDX, and SIFT SBOM, so pretty standard like SIFT install sort of thing. And then it does vulnerability scans with Cripe, and all of that goes into your pipeline. If you're doing this in a pipeline, it gets uploaded to each release, all that sort of basic stuff. So we are going to export that on disk. We're going to find a couple findings. There we go. No criticals, 2 highs. It generates a new block file from scratch with the latest versions on generation of the project. And you saw that the test passed, so it's good. But maybe we've got some work to do on the vulnerabilities. Is that everything? Oh, yeah. Well, there's the SBOMs and the vulnerability scans. They do exist. It'd be cool if we could like shovel them over into Guac automatically, but it doesn't do that today. So, anyways, the point of that was, example, if anyone's not familiar with paved road, just some sort of baseline features that people may want. And if you want to enforce policy as code in your pipelines and things like that, you make it easy like that to get started and then put it in the pipelines from there. So you've got it from the beginning. All right, questions?
Normally, you connect all the pipeline or whatever, the policy agent, so like a Styra or something, like or something. So those kind of a load platform to get the policy and reply to the local. If you're having a problem section, so that's more HTTPS for connection. So it's a burden actually to my whole network. Because again, I have to call their system and then to the so whole kind of how much is it?
Oh, you're saying the concern is that it's slow? Yeah. It's slow if you're doing like an admission webhook, like validation webhook. Is that what you're saying?
They're doing the HTTP selection. So
yeah, right. Yeah, right. It absolutely will. Yeah. Well, oh, just faster than on the network. Well, there's getting rid of the network entirely with Cell, right? So that's what I was showing earlier. This one. So now it's built into the cluster. So Cell is actually inside of the cluster, so it doesn't have to go out, and you don't have the the external dependency as well. Now, this is fairly limited. So, and there was a decent talk at Coupon last year. If you want to kind of get ramped up on the features, but yeah.
So that I can deploy directly into the FI. There is no like requirement, like I mean, like post it in a separate system or cloud system, and then to call it and then whenever required to deploy into my local. Like I mean, this policy.
What did you say? F5? What did you call? Oh, okay.
You know, you go to a cloud system to fetch the policy and then to
Mhm.
deploy to my local.
Yeah.
But what you're showing actually is more on the slide is in-house agent. So the in-house agent you can deploy all the policy assets. In that case, actually there is no use case.
Oh, zero trust. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. To be honest, I mean, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to hear as well. So, yeah. Mhm. I mean, you could still cryptographically verify the connection with that other system too. You could cryptographically verify it can be signed. You can have some sort of trust ahead of time. Yeah, publish a public key and use TLS to grab the public key and cache it and things like that. So it's kind of non-zero. Or also, you could prime the pump, and you could just have something preloaded in there. I mean, there's always the trust on first use problem where you have to bootstrap yourself, right? But yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So are you doing a lot of work in like with zero trust, like moving to zero trust? Okay. Mhm. Yeah, I've done a little bit of work with zero trust, like specifically zero trust initiatives, and kind of like carving out very specific areas of a project to improve. Have you looked at? I mean, coming from the U.S., I think of this it's a guidance where they came out specific to the whatever they call it, the 5 pillars of zero trust, and kind of ways to start approaching projects, and then guidance for the U.S. government on how to implement and things like that, which at least kind of starts to point in the right direction and kind of finds out projects and concepts and things like that. But I don't know if that's kind of going in the direction that you're thinking. All right. Cool. Other questions? All right. Thank you. Um, done. Okay. No mystery guests today. I wasn't sure. Oh, actually, let me check over here. Um, I missed the project name for SSP management earlier. Yes. So that is Trestle compliance. Great. Any other questions from online? Or are we just going to keep enjoying the inception, especially with like the 15-second delay? It's kind of
Like all this best data is verified. Of course, there's like many different standards that are but the open source are you would argue that these are one level.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, organizations would build every open source after that they can sue the source, then they can tackle this themselves. But if they want to pursue like the open source project, the registry, like container,
Yeah.
Let's say let's pick one open source project signed with one image signing technology, like say CoSign, the other signed with something like Notary, B2.
Are you trying to bait me into like a notary versus? Hold on a second. Yeah.
Like as
there's many companies that like to want to really use container business rather than like topic them around the place and say one team is based on Google Cloud has gone down, providing native solutions.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Do you have experience with that sort of conflict?
Yeah. Oh yeah, like last week. Like yeah. Yeah. So just to reiterate for everyone online, there are competing specifications with pretty much everything right now. There's a lot of new, yeah, SBOMs is another one, CycloneDS, SPDX, whatever. And then we're talking about Notary and Cosign as different competing specifications from the two leading ones. But an organization may fall into a situation where, especially through acquisition or something like that, one part of the org or one organization might use one and another part of it might use another. Also, multiple clouds and things like that. How do you handle it? So I have some, I don't know, maybe not super popular opinions on this, which is that I love automation and policy as code and things like that. But I think that over standardizing is poison to companies, and that we should not try to overly enforce one across the organization, but we should kind of let them work it out and let organizations do it and support multiple things. I realize that's a fairly unpopular opinion, uh, but that's kind of the way that I feel right now, and I just kind of let all of them go. With reason, right? Like it needs to be functional, like it needs to be useful, and it needs to meet the business objectives requirements. Like, why are we finding this in the first place? Can it achieve whatever that objective is?
Got a level of control over, like, as you said, like fish purpose and stuff like that. You employ to give yourself a fighting chance of verifying the way you want.
Yeah.
But if you're like a manager, yeah, that sort of thing, you're beholden to whatever the company is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If we don't sure we do, but
Okay, yeah, super complicated question. Which was essentially, uh, there are some maybe vendor specific implementations of tools and things that won't support open standards, like how to do, admission control. Yeah, yeah, or one or not the other. Like, trying to do admission control in ECS, where like, okay, you could do something like that, but you'd have to set up an event bridge or a task deployment, push it to a Lambda, check, do whatever you want to check, and then go kill the task. That's totally an AWS thing, and that's not going to that's nothing like running or or anything like that. And so I guess I don't know. I have a lot of unpopular opinions in this space, and I'm totally fine with just being locked in to it. I think it's possible that a locked-in vendor solution would be better for business long term. I think that having open standards is extremely important, and I think that may the best man win. So if I think the open standard should uh, see sufficient investment from enough separate companies that they could probably provide something more valuable than a locked-in version of a similar feature could do, and then it will win, and maybe we'll still be in a place where that vendor isn't gonna budge and gonna stay.
like for example, like I said, no.
Oh, well, I mean, I've got 3 SBOMs right there. Um, uh, um, I don't have a strong opinion on that one. So the question is kind of for open projects that are distributing things to consumers, should they follow all of the standards because any customer can choose any of the standards they want? Yeah, again, within reason, like some nascent standard or some dying standard, we don't really need to focus much on. Um, I don't have a strong opinion on that one. I kind of just do a best. Like it's super easy. Like I just changed a couple arguments and I did some more SBOM. Like I don't think I'm killing anybody by storing those in a GitHub pipeline, and if they're like a couple megs, like whatever, and I expire them after 90 days, um, or I shut them off the block if that would matter. Just the project doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything right here. It's like a no op. So this project isn't super meaningful. So yeah, I don't have a super strong. I mean, does anyone else have a strong opinion? I don't know. No. Yeah, I do have strong opinions on the first two, but the last one, yeah, not as much. Like, should they support all the standards? They should support whatever standards they want to. I don't think unless they're getting compensated or somehow incentives to follow what or what the consumers want. Maybe they're not even right. They can do whatever they want. It's up to them. It's their project, not our project, right? You were told to sign 3 times. Yeah. Wait, why 3 times? What's the third? Oh yeah, okay. Google Cloud Binary. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, well, what I like about that solution is to make it really easy to do, then sure, people should start using it, right? It's really like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth the effort to do? Well, if we make tools that make it easy to do these, like of an abstraction or one tool and many things. I mean, that's essentially Swift, right? Like I said, Swift, like boom, 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 drop some things out, and great. So I use Swift now. I could use other things to do it, but yeah. Cool. All right. Last check for online questions. I think we're all good there. So I think we're going to wrap it up for the night then. Thanks everyone for coming to the kickoff. Did you want to say anything or? Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Thanks everybody. See you later. I'm surprised this actually worked. I'm really impressed. Check it out. Yes. Stop recording.